What's going on, Chooms? Welcome back to Tabletop Cyberpunk. My name is JonJonTheWise. Today I have a very special guest with me. I have Dustin Morgan from Infinite Sided Dice. Dustin, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. It's good to have you on. Before we get deep into it, we want to make sure that we plug everything that you're doing. Today we're going to be talking about world building with Dustin. He is a game master, a longtime game master, longtime gamer, and he has this beautiful show called Edge of Extinction on Infinite Sided Dice's Twitch and YouTube channel. It is an actual play podcast. Have you guys done the podcast thing too?
Yeah, it will probably end up as a podcast at some point. We've tried very hard to capture really crisp, beautiful audio, so it'll transfer over pretty easily, I think.
Great. Give me that elevator pitch for that amazing show that I'm already a big fan of.
What is the show? Infinite Sided Dice is a brand new channel, and we're launching it with our flagship show, which is Cyberpunk Edge of Extinction. It's a cyberpunk campaign with myself as game master. It's using the Cyberpunk Red system set in 2045, and the cast is incredible. They're all very talented role players and great gamers, and they're all people I played with for some of them for a long time, some I've known for a very long time, and a few and I just met Day, but she is fantastic. If Day and Hutton is really just really talented actor and role player, and just really makes the show so fun. Yeah. That's basically it. That wasn't an elevator. It was a very long elevator.
Yeah. We're going to the penthouse.
Yeah, very long elevator pitch.
We have a very interesting origin story. Basically, I moved to Santa Clarita. Me moving to Santa Clarita and starting my channel was kind of how like all this happened. I was like, I'm gonna start my channel. I'm gonna get into tabletop gaming. I've always wanted to like be head first in it, not just like have it as a side hobby, and make it my main hobby, I guess. And I found this amazing oasis in Santa Clarita called Green Tower Games that is owned by your brother, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we owe a lot to Green Tower, and Garrett has put in the work to keep it the gamers oasis that it is now.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. It's like, it's everything you would want in a game shop. Like, I've heard all kinds of horror stories from game shop owners. Like, if you got the wrong guy that owns the shop too, like, that's like one of the worst things that could ever happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely right. It's a weirdly gatekeepery community, but what's cool is I just feel like the trend has been away from that for a long time now. Yeah, especially well, maybe it's a survival mechanism. Maybe you used to be able to be like that and still keep a business open, but nowadays you can't do that.
No, it turns out if everybody's an asshole, nobody wants to go there, you know?
Yeah, but also like, yeah, bring more people into the only thing that bringing more people into the community does is grow it. It diversifies. You get more interesting stories being told. You get more guys to play with on the weekend. Like, imagine, like, at any given time I can hop on Discord, I can find a game of 40K or Sigmar or Cyberpunk or D&D, or there's people there playing Marvel Crisis Protocol. There's like huge communities of like all these different kinds of gamers, and that's really down to like Garrett sacrificing a lot to just sort of keep that store as cool as it is. And I'm glad I was there. I was just there covering some shifts, and John walked in, and our eyes locked, and it was like da 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 dee.
He saw my bald, beautiful face, and he's like, "This is what I've been looking for all my life." Yeah, I mean, I walked in because your brother was gonna play in my game. I invited him to play in Under the Crimson Sky. For those of you that don't know as well, Dustin plays F-150 in Under the Crimson Sky, my actual play that I have going on my channel. So I invited Garrett, your brother, and I told you about it. I was like, yeah, he's gonna play in my game, and you showed interest. You're like, oh, I've been meaning to get into it. And
Hmm.
I'm like, you know, if I love one Morgan, I'm sure I'm gonna love another.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So invited you. We hit it off. We played. We gel really well. I have nothing but respect for you guys, and it's really awesome to be able to meet some awesome people in this community. And then you drop this bombshell on me, where you're like, "Hey, I've been thinking of doing like an actual play." And
Yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, that's amazing, dude. Like, tell me about that whole genesis of it."
for sure. It really, so for those of you that don't know, I'm a composer by trade, and I work in the film industry, and among other things. But through that, I've met the guy who plays Brett on Cyberpunk: Edge of Extinction, EOE, right? Uh, um, and he owns a sound stage, and he has this like we were just drinking at a bar one night, and he's like, "Hey, do you play D&D?" And I'm like, "Oh, do I play D&D? Yeah." And so I showed up at his sound stage, and he's got it all blacked out with cool lights, and he has this great setup with video screens and this beautiful you saw it, this beautiful sound stage called Rise Motion Picture Studio. And immediately we started talking about recording an actual play in one way or another. He's also a screenwriter, so he has a pitch of like a D&D based sort of sitcom-y kind of show, and we were just bouncing ideas off. But we love the idea of an actual play, but of course Dungeons and Dragons is a game that is actual play to death right now. um yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it's being done really well by lots of people and poorly by even more people. And frankly, it was just, if I wanted an actual play, I could turn on YouTube and find it. And um but then when John invited me to come play Cyberpunk, and I was like, oh, this seems like it would be fun, and it's a good thing to do on a weeknight or whatever. But the game is like so like clean, and I played some Cyberpunk. I'm not gonna throw shade at earlier editions of Cyberpunk, but I played this game what it was like 2013 edition. What is it? Like before 2020?
That was the original OG 89, I think it came out.
Okay, yeah. So I played some in the early 90s, I think, is probably the last time I touched that game. And it was, the world appealed to me immediately, right? I love the genre and I love the movies and everything, but for some reason the gameplay doesn't really click. The same is true of D&D, honestly. Like early editions of that game didn't really click for me. But I didn't touch 2020. So for just to be clear on everything that I do and talk about, but Red was so clean and so fun to play and so easy, and it was, especially you throw in that companion app and a GM like John, and I was like, this game slaps, right?
Who kind?
And yeah, and I'm like, I want more Cyberpunk, and the first thing I did was go on YouTube and start searching around. And I don't know if it's a matter of like, I think Red launched during COVID, and I imagine that was a little hard for them, and there just wasn't the support. Like when Polygon had like a little actual play, and then Telsorian did like their own, but it was a Zoom call thing where I'm sure they would have rather done a more highly produced thing. And I imagine just by the time you could start doing things in person, it was on to producing the video game or whatever else they're busy doing. And there just really wasn't the content. I'm sure that you had the same instinct, right? That's why you wanted to create an actual play. It's just, it wasn't there. So
Yeah, I don't think it's their responsibility to do that show. I think we're all looked at them because we're like, you guys are the ones that have this amazing game, and we want this thing. And their philosophy is like, yeah, we'd love to do like little collaborations here and there, but we make games. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're game makers, and they made a great game.
Exactly. So it was on the community to try to figure it out, and I was like, geez, I guess it's me.
Yeah, who's the community?
Who else is it gonna be, you know?
Yeah, and I think, well, what's great is well, we're gonna spend the whole. We're supposed to talk about world building, but we're talking about the building the world of Cyberpunk, because then the video game comes out and it also had its own issues, right? Its own hiccups. But right as the time we played our actual play, and then Danny came out and ran a game at Green Tower, and we were standing in the parking lot, and I was like, hey, you know, this is the thing to do. It's the world is hungry for it. The community is hungry for it, right? The community that exists is hungry for it. There's a whole community that doesn't even know about it that's hungry for it, and we can get there real quick. So it was always going to be Danny and Lex, and then Anais, for those of you that don't know, is my daughter. So she was an obvious choice, and we brought in Day as Anais' friend to sort of balance out the table. And the cast just fell into place, so that was just sort of fortuitous. And then Danny has his sound stage, and we started talking about cameras. And then and the more excited I got about the idea, the more I would talk to everybody about it. So I went to a soccer match, big LAFC, their Western Conference Finals this Sunday. I'll be there. But I went to a soccer match with my buddy Sean, who is just also works in the industry. He works in reality television, but I'm not friends with him because of that. I'm friends with him because like we were in high school together and like lived together for a while. And he's like my best friend since I was like 10 years old or something. And he is a television producer and has some cameras, and he was like, oh, hey, I could probably, if we're not renting them out, I could give you these cameras to shoot with. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then the next day we talked, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about just being a producer on this? This is some whatever shop talk, that this isn't gamer talk, but like he got excited about it because I started talking about it, and I was really excited about it. And then he goes, hey, like a week later, my director of photography on this show I'm working on is a big gamer. He's a big D&D guy, and he loves the idea. So then we got Ryan, who is our director of photography, and he came in and he's brought like a whole concept for lighting, and then and he's just really capturing beautiful images. And
I remember you went from like idea, because people, you know, everybody says things like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then it was like, oh yeah, we're recording like in a week. And I'm like, oh man, this thing's happening.
Yeah, it was like, I get motivated on ideas. I don't know. Yeah, I think you're probably the same way.
Especially when you see things come to fruition, you're like, oh, I guess I can do it. If I just
Sure.
do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it can be done, I can do it. And I would have done it exactly like you. I would have put 2 cameras in a living room and done it. Like that was where I was at, because I had an idea, and I love the game so much. But obviously we had the soundstage, then we had this director of photography and all this stuff. And
you have all these opportunities where it's like going to be a legit show, like 4K cameras in a studio with set design. And like, yeah, this is the way to do it.
And it just snowballs, right? It grows and grows and grows, because then he gets involved, and then I'm like, well, we better have something to look at if we're gonna have all these cameras. So I get Garrett to start designing terrain, and we're like, well, let's build. I wish that's going to feature more in the show as we go forward. We probably didn't have the optimal setup to really show how amazing the board looks. Right now you're getting a top down in the lower quarter, which is cool, but the minis, I spent, I don't know, I probably spent 80 hours painting miniatures. And in addition to, let's go. Yeah. And yeah, Garrett also spent another 40 hours. I think there's a miniature that he stayed up all night painting, and because we were shooting at 8 a.m. the next day. By the way, spoiler alert, we pre-record.
Yeah, for those of you coming back, we had a pizza delivery that we had to take care of. So now we're back, but you guys don't know that because we just continued on. So the moral of the story is everybody got together. You have, I think you're offering 2 new things. First of all, it's a Cyberpunk Red actual play, long form campaign, episodes, seasons, reoccurring actors. You know, that's something we don't have right now. Now we have it.
Yeah.
The other thing there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say we shot at this point. There's 16 hours of game that's in the can right now, and there will be a lot more the minute we can get back into the studio. But that sort of relies a little bit on some support from the community. But we'll get to that later, I suppose.
Yeah. So, and then, and the other thing you guys are offering is the minis. You don't usually see minis and terrain in actual plays. And I know that, bring it over. I know that's something that you were like, hey, John, I know you like Theater of the Mind versus battle maps, but I'm a battle maps guy.
Yeah. I don't, those of you running your own games, do not feel obligated, though, to do what I did. It took me and Garrett. So that was the story, is that I had to pick up that mini from Garrett at 7 in the morning. And he walked out in his pajamas. I think he'd been up painting all night long. And he handed it to me. And I was like, thanks, bye. And he was like, are you not even going to look at it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. It's so early. Oh, my God. Yeah, it is so good. It's so good. I cannot show it to you because it would be such a massive spoiler. It's right there. But yeah, I will put pictures of it.
Don't worry, you guys will see it in the show. Don't worry about that. So, so if now switching gears, we talked about the genesis of the show. I'm really curious because we haven't had this conversation. We talked about having this conversation. The building of the world, the building of the lore. You went with Night City, and you said you picked a little pocket. And then I do remember you telling me something about using the players' backstories as well to kind of put something together. But what was your initial idea when you're like, okay, I'm going to put something together?
Yeah, sure. It's such an interesting topic in Cyberpunk to talk about world building, because I think if you come from a fantasy mindset, you're like, well, the world is built. You're looking at Night City, right? It's a 400-page book. I think there's probably 150 of those pages are straight up lore. They're maps. They describe what the corporations are. It just goes deep. They go super hard on the lore. But when you take a step back from that, you can see that there's actually a lot of space left inside of Night City for you to just play around. And they've actually, it's not a sandbox, it's a playground, right? They've given you the swing set and the jungle gym, but you can still make all your own fun and create your own game within that. Yeah, and the more I thought about it, so in terms of concept, what I came up with was more like the corporations that we know and love, the Arasakas, the Militechs, the Biotechnicas. That's the pantheon of Night City, right? So, and what's interesting about Red is Arasaka is like a fallen god, right? During the time of the Red, this is a banished god that has been, thrown into the abyss. And there are still like people in the mortal realm, i.e. Night City, that are working to resurrect this god. So as soon as I started thinking about it like that, I was like, oh, great. So you have people that are devout worshipers of the different gods that work for the corporations, and those become the corporate whatevers. And then the edge runners themselves exist outside of that system or manipulate that system in their own way. And I was like, okay, I'm freed from this idea that you have to live in a framework here. It's more like the framework is there to support whatever idea you want to create. So, I mean, okay, buckle up. I'm a fan. There's a guy named Tim Hickson. I think his YouTube channel is called Hello Future Me, and he is obsessed with like Avatar: The Last Airbender and all things fantasy, but a little bit of sci-fi, but mostly world building. He has a whole book called On Writing and World Building, and he talks about how one of the keys to the world building is empires, right? So no matter what world you're talking about, you're interacting with an empire in one way or another. The American Empire, the British Empire, the Middle Earth, or whatever, Battlestar Galactica, or Star Trek. There's the Federation is an empire, the Klingons are an empire, and it's like you're creating an empire when you world build.
It's basically anybody that has the privilege to oppress the another class. So it can be like as micro as a corporation, or as macro as the entire United States.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily about oppression. It's sometimes it's about like protection, or every gang is an empire. The structure of a boss of a certain city block, that's also they're building their own empire. So every NPC is trying to carve out their own empire. So when you start thinking about that way, you understand your NPC's motivations a lot better. So he talks about, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, but he talks about the 3 C's of empires. So it's commerce, it's communication, and it's control, right? So communication,
people, technology, and power.
Yeah, exactly, right? Communication in Night City seems like it's obvious. Like you can use your agent to talk to each other. It's like in fantasy, you'd be like, well, communication is on horseback. So little towns can't communicate with their king quickly. So then the structure changes. But the way communication works in Night City for me is it's about access. Like who can you talk to? You can't just talk to the CEO of Arasaka in Japan or anybody. Like so people guard these avenues of communication really carefully, because that's power, right?
It's privilege, it's influence, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So and you'll see, so then when your characters start to subvert people's lines of communication, so you have like a boss, and then a boss's underling, and then the underling is the fixer that hired you. And then suddenly you talk to the person above your fixer, and your fixer goes like, what are you guys doing?
And you went from ally to enemy like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that fixer is gonna act accordingly, right? So they'll stop doing what you wanted them to do, or they'll act against, or maybe they'll be cool, maybe you'll explain it and it'll be fine. But essentially all this world building is really just about giving your NPCs motivation, right? And so then that big boss, like, why is he in control in the first place? Like, what is it just because he's got a linear frame and he can kick everyone's ass? Probably not, because that's not enough. He's probably got access to, maybe he has a relationship with a nomad tribe and knows how to import cabbage or some shit that nobody else can get. And now he's in charge of his block because of that. Or maybe he takes over a booster gang because he can get them better drugs. And since they want those, why are they in his empire, right? So that's part of his control. So this is the second C, is control, right? It's about...
in my homebrew campaign of the Devil's Triangle, the Amber Oasis, that nomad family, the only reason they have influence is because they facilitate trade throughout the cities. So whether you're a corporation or a government entity or just a booster gang, you need them. Yeah,
absolutely. And actually, communication in your campaign factors way huge, because the brilliance of the red, right? This like getting rid of the internet is amazing, right? Because now you basically, the way I think of it is, your agent can like send an SMS message, right? Or maybe make a phone call. But like when you're in the middle of Texas, out in the desert, like that shit don't work. And you're cut off. Like it's a whole different way of interacting with the world. It was really fascinating, actually, because, well, I don't know. We're going to talk about both campaigns at the same time.
It's all the campaigns, man. That's we're some of all of our experiences.
Yeah, that's actually what I love about the Amber Oasis. Is part of it is the communication, and the control is there too, because you have a nomad tribe. They're not necessarily like holding everyone at gunpoint. It's just that they have access to the vehicles and the trade routes, and are able to communicate with people that can get things that people need. And what that does for your game, to bring it back to the game, is now you know how those nomads will react if you try to subvert that control or go around them. Then you now have caused conflict within your campaign.
You're basically creating the status quo, and then you're leaving it to the players to figure out how they navigate through it.
Yes, exactly, right? You create a system, and then you look at their backstories, right? So the trick is you look at their backstories and you see what they're motivated to do. Then you create a world and a system that goes diametrically opposed to the things that they want to do in their life, and that is conflict. You look at, so Brez and Nomad, Nautica / Shitwrecked is a corpo media, and their two worlds collide, and they just happen to be on the front of that wave as they both crash into each other. So it makes for just like this, immediately there's just this really interesting conflict, and you just kind of sit back. Once you've done all that prep, you just sit back and see how they want to navigate. You don't even have to really push plot, because they're pushing the plot, because that's their job.
Yeah, because they're always going to do things that motivate them anyway. And because of the life path system of Cyberpunk, you know a clue into the things that motivate their characters as well. So, you know, you can subtly throw things at them that you know that they're going to bite, but you don't know what direction they're going to take it in. You know what I mean? So both of you are getting some kind of response. It's like, hey, the worst thing is when you throw something and they're all like, yeah, I don't know what that is, ignore it. But if you throw something and they're like, I don't know how to handle this right now, that's good, because at least they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The life path thing is great. That's one of the highlights of the Red Book, is like the different life paths for the different roles is super interesting, and you can just roll that. You can choose, like, obviously, as we went to create this show, we didn't just like randomly roll dice to see what we got, but we worked really carefully, but using those as prompts for our own creativity.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good way to do it. And I always say, once you make that character, it tells a story in itself. You have a story before you even roll dice, and that's something you don't really get in a lot of RPGs. Cyberpunk does it really well. I've heard Traveler does too. I've never personally played it, but Mike Pondsmith was inspired by Traveler's life path system when he created Cyberpunk.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff.
Yeah, you better have a life before the game starts, because your life isn't going to last much longer once the game does start. Yeah, we're seeing the end of the stories.
I know, and I think that's why when players lose their characters in Cyberpunk, it hurts more, because it's like you're so invested. There's like so many. It's just like a real life. There's so many unfinished things that are in your life path.
Yeah, without naming names, but one of the players in the show asked me, like, well, if the fans really like my character, aren't they going to be mad if you kill them? And I'm like, I don't care.
This is what we signed up for.
I don't know what are you trying to like get some extra armor out of me by saying you're a fan favorite? Because that ain't going to fly. No, actually, it's the opposite, right? The more the fans like them, the better it's going to be when I mean, like, have you watched the whole anime? I mean,
yeah, spoiler alert for the anime, spoiler alert.
Yeah. Hang out for 10 seconds.
10 seconds. It's a Shakespearean tragedy, and that's what makes it such an amazing story, is because life is cheap, and the characters that you're invested in, they are just a part of that system.
Yeah, but those are the stories. This is what in this system. Okay, chill out, Dustin. All right,
I love this.
This is what grabbed me about the system. So like, it just grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, "Hey, you're you're using Cyberpunk Red because I love even stuff that is outside of the cyberpunk genre, but like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or the stuff is the Young Guns, that like cowboy shootout. I'm just on a Western kick, I guess. The heist movies where it doesn't always go well, but it's about heat. Yeah, absolutely right. And others within the sci-fi genre, obviously, or cyberpunk genre. But it's like you're telling like a socio-political morality tale wrapped up in a tragedy, all while looking really cool. And it and this is yeah.
That's what's so deep about it. It's like people still, at the end of the day, like, you look at it from the outside, you're like, dude, all these clothes and flashy cars, it's so insignificant when you can literally just get shot by a stray bullet walking out of your house. But people, the human condition will not let that go by. We won't let that rule over us. We're still going to express ourselves. We still want individuality, even through all that. Your dog's going off. Don't worry about it. We all have dogs. And even in the dark future, there's dogs.
Yeah. Cyber dogs. Okay. I think they might be chilling. Okay. That's actually, so coming back to the show a little bit, the title of the show is The Edge of Extinction. And that is exactly what I wanted to explore, is like, what does humanity do at the end? What will people do to survive when the ocean is rising and there's fallout in the air, and you're staring extinction right in the face? And do people turn to religion? Do they try to become machines? Do they shun that as the thing that led them down the dark path and purify their bodies like that? Or do they just like get what they can and live as high as they can while they crash?
Because you never know when it's going to be your time.
Yeah.
Man. And it's so easy to like feel for everybody, even corpos. Like, corporations are the worst. We all know they're the bad guy. There's a reason why Arasaka's the bad guy in everybody's game, is because we all know what it's like to work for a corporation, be exploited by a corporation, and Cyberpunk takes it to the highest level. But when you look at that like low level corporate, and they're like, well, I get to live in like a white picket fence in a corporate zone, there's security, I can have an actual family, I guess signing on that dotted line is really tempting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because let's be honest, take a look at yourself. You would be one. Come on. I'm sitting in a house with 2 dogs in front of a bookshelf. Like,
yeah. I would be terrified to lose that position.
We all want to believe the best of ourselves in those moments. And maybe it's true. Maybe that's who we would be. But that's why we play the game, right? Because we want to explore that part of ourselves and really tell the stories of what it means to fight against or be a part of, or and it's really fun because you're playing a game where everybody, if you do it right, everybody's motivated. They're all just self-interested mostly, but there is no fucking Vecna, right? There's no just bad person. Like, maybe they're bad people, but they're bad in a sort of like realistic, self-interested way. They do bad things, but like, they're still people. They're not demons. There isn't some supernatural force beyond. You have to actually draw a line from like, they were a baby, they were raised a certain way, and then they became this way, and then they're just as much victims of the machinery as the edge runners themselves are. It's just the choices that they've made and what they will do to maintain their status quo. This is the empire, right? If you're inside the empire, like, yeah, the walls are keeping you safe. And when people threaten your ability to, whatever, have a house or whatever, eat the right flavor kibble, drink Coca-Cola, like when people threaten that, that's like you're gonna fight to protect it.
Yeah, because it's
So,
all you have left.
yeah. And on top of that, propaganda is another huge part of it as well, right? So there's the reality of, yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole thing where like they just want total control of everything. I mean, we're going through that's why cyberpunk is so hard it's like we wish it wasn't so true in our lives. We got these algorithms that are looking at our every tick and movement to figure out what they can advertise to us. That kind of psychic mind war happens in cyberpunk too, you know, but there's way less protection for the people.
Sure. And I don't know, maybe if we play hard enough, it won't happen.
Yeah, I know. That's it. You know, we're like, I played cyberpunk. I would not want to live in that world at all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't. Sorry to get dark, folks.
No, I mean, it's the dark future. I think that's why we love it, because how does every game start? Every game, cyberpunk game, starts in a nightclub. There's drinking, there's fun, there's rolling ones on your resist torture drugs when you take a drink, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's the whole like tit for tat, having conversations with people. I'm a badass, you're a badass. And then it's like, okay, we're all having laughs and we're having fun, but there's betrayal, there's backstabbing, there's danger, there is grim undertones with everything else, violence. And even though those things we don't want to see in our lives, we know that that's part of the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's so fun also just to explore that with your friends and like, you know, really think about it. And also it's fun to roll dice and shoot guns and like live those fantasies.
The cool thing about cyberpunk is you can explore it in many different angles. You know, the solo is basically like, oh, there are monsters out there, so I need to be a scarier monster than all the other monsters. That's what a solo is. But the corpo and the fixer is like, there's monsters out there, so I need to make friends with monsters to protect me from the other monsters. And you can easily explore both options. Sometimes one is more appropriate than the other, and everyone can have their enjoyment of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all the roles have their role to play.
The roles have their role to play.
Yeah. I really appreciate like the diversity of the types of characters you can play too. It's easy for like a power gamer to walk into the game and be like, why would anybody play a media? Why would anybody do that? And I'm like, but that's where the story is, you know. They come in with the story, you know. They are the plot. They're chasing the things down. Yeah, we have no solos in our group. We had one who wanted to play, Lex was going to play a solo, and then I was like, yeah, but did you read Rocker Boy? Because, bro, you're a Rocker Boy.
He plays no one else. For sure.
Yeah, it was literally like, I think he was trying not to because it's so...
on type.
Yeah, on type for him. But yeah, he texted me like 3 days later. He's like, I'm right. You're right. I'm going to be a Rocker Boy. It's just he's so funny. Yeah, the first 2 episodes are pretty, like you said, drinking in a bar, shooting some goons, going to a party, and then and it goes sideways after that.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually have to make a living in cyberpunk, you know, you don't bag groceries to make a living in cyberpunk. You know, you got to go do things that are terrible.
Yeah, and It so light spoilers for episode 3, I think. There's just to sort of talk about the difference between Cyberpunk and a lot of other games you might play. They're sitting in a bar in front of the fixer that sort of the premise is that one of them hired the other 3 through a fixer to like do a job. And then like they do their job, and sort of like in most games, I'm deliberately deleting any game system names here, but like you might do a job for money and then you're like, we're a party now, and you never worry about that again, right? We just do things whatever we want. They're sitting in the same bar in front of the same fixer, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go do all this stuff. And then the fixer says, hey, can I talk to you for a second? This is my crew. You don't get to just fucking take them, right? This is, you owe me money. Like, you pay me, I pay them. You don't get to just take them, right? You're cutting me out of this deal. And it's like this idea of like, no, the world is alive. Like, you can't just sit in a random bar in front of a bartender or a fixer that is a bartender and have a discussion about what you're going to do and have them not listen to you like, oh yeah, sounds good to me. It's like, no, man, that's their livelihood, right? Fixers fix. And if you go around them, you've pissed them off, right? So then it became an altercation, like a really genuine altercation. And then they were like backing off, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll pay you. It's fine. It's, I thought we were on the same. They said they would do it. I'm like, I don't care what they say. They work for me, right? You're putting them at danger. That's my asset, right? And so then now you've built that conflict, but then you've also built the conflict of like, oh, they work for you. And now they have to decide when they're going to break off that relationship. And it's a pretty serious relationship between a fixer and a edge runner that gets jobs through them.
Yeah, it's so much more complicated than pulling out a pistol and shooting somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, the minute you give people names and personalities and all that stuff, it's yeah, it can get really heavy. I mean, that's why we put a content warning on the front of the show. Like, that was one thing, but going into the show, we were like, hey, we are going to talk about some stuff. And chances are, on any given day when we stream, there's probably going to be something in the news that's fucking horrible. And, so we're just going to be aware of that and just understand that the story we're telling is about humanity and about our struggle, our sort of universal struggle, and it involves guns and shooting people.
Yeah, but I mean, even though those terrible things are happening, the real essence of the story with the players is how they are the captains of their own destiny. And they're like, yeah, I'm in this world, I'm in this meat grinder, but I'm making my own mark here. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do, because I have the power to create opportunities with other opportunities.
Yeah.
And when they take down that big bad corporation at the end, that it's like that much sweeter because of all the things they went through.
Yeah. It's about free will.
Right.
Yeah, I remember in one of my campaigns, one of my players, like, it was weeks and weeks of playing. The story was they killed his wife. Some corporate guy put a hit out on his wife. His wife was a news reporter. She was talking too much. He finally got down to the guy that gave the order like all the way at the top. And when he faced him, it was his brother. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't go through with taking him out. And it was like a heavy moment for him. The guy was going to get arrested. He's going to jail. It's going to be bad for him, but he didn't take him out, It was a heavy, heavy thing to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... And what a powerful situation you created as a game master. And also, you just sit there and let the player truly decide their fate, like, this is the collaboration, right?
Yeah, he's like, I get to decide what happens, because I told him, because it's out of my hands. I'm like, here's the NPC, he's here, you have a gun to his head, you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And he decided this is what my story is going to be.
That's the lesson, game masters, right? It's at best it's a choose your own adventure, right? Like in terms of the linear progress of your plot. But like, no, man, you're just world building. This is what we're talking about. I don't have to bring it back. And finding out what it is these characters want to do, right? And just letting them exist. Yeah.
That's it. Let me ask you, how do you think about, so we're talking about like the macro, you know,
Sure.
you build the whole world, but when it gets down to game time, the session, for building for the session, what do you keep in mind? What's at the front of your mind when you're running the session?
That's a good question. And it depends on the type of game I'm running. Like if it's just a bunch of friends coming together for a one shot, I basically have just my list of NPCs and their stats and how the gunfights are going to go and how the encounters are built. We could talk about it. I mean, encounter building is a huge part of world building and the game, and that it's part of why the game the terrain that I use is really interesting because it's modular and it gives players a real sense of the telemetry of the encounter, and they feel really empowered to make moves and hide behind things and do stuff. I like to create counters that have that are unstable, so things that have a clock on them, things that explode. If your encounter is getting boring, if you guys are just like hiding in cover and I shoot twice and then I shoot twice and then I shoot twice, have one of the NPCs hit a propane tank and blow the wall up and set everyone on fire, and you know, don't let your encounters be static. So that's part of what I think about is just the encounters that could or could not happen, that will probably happen. Mostly I'm trying to mostly I try to just be in the moment. I don't try to plan too far ahead. I try to just really know the characters as best I can. Like my session zeros are pretty obnoxious, probably, if you've never played with me. Like I send I send an email with about 10 questions, and they're I don't have the list in front of me, but it's like, tell me a story from your past, tell me this, create an NPC that's in the world that you can interact with. So I have lots and lots of toys to play with when it comes to how to motivate the characters. Yeah, and then I try to, you know, on a macro level, like on a campaign from week to week, I try to keep track of what's happening that week. If I know that Arasaka is developing a new weapon and is shipping it somewhere, like where are they in that process, sort of. So I have my own internal clock as to how things are going. And then that in turn helps me motivate my NPCs to do certain things. You know, yeah, but mostly I'm just freaking out.
No.
No, I think you mentioned something very important, is to just live in the moment, because I know a lot of pitfalls that I had in my early times being a game master is I thought I had to have notes for everything just in case I needed to look it up. And in practice, you end up looking up zero because it's like you don't have time. You have to be in the moment. Things are happening. So you have to focus on what's happening in front of you and how you think the world would react to your players.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, if you're goons, I think John has a great video on the like 3 goon method. And it's like super simple way to just run a fight. Like anything outside of a fight, sure. I have a whole Google Drive full of NPCs with their own stats and their motivations and stuff like that. But like in terms of just like how are they going to be able to shoot, like whatever, just use your 3 goon method. Give them a +8 or 11 or 15 or whatever the numbers are, and that impacts the story like this much. You know, you want to create an encounter that's fair, but you also want it to be tense, and you also want the threat of death to be there. There's not that many encounters in my games. In fact, like if there's one criticism of my style from people is like they possibly don't get to like do enough action. Like the fights are a little bit more spare, but for me that's because I don't want to run a fight where the players can't that isn't serving a purpose. Like if it isn't moving the story forward, and if the characters can't possibly die, then it's just boring. If you're just randomly, I don't want to randomly kill dudes in the street. That's boring. If there's no chance that your character can die, you're just going to stand there and swing a sword and gain XP. Like that's boring to me also. So every encounter should either move the story forward or be an opportunity to end a story. And if it's not that, then I'm not super concerned with it. I have stats for every NPC, but like I said, if you just make them up, if you just know, like, you've played enough Cyberpunk, or maybe you haven't, but like, if you haven't played a lot of Cyberpunk, watch JonJon's 3 Goon video. It'll tell you, like, if this guy's tough, give him a 15 or whatever. And just do it for all the numbers. It doesn't matter, like, whatever. If the guy can drive a car, just use the same number. Like, he's got good vehicle. Drive land vehicle. There's too many skills to worry about, all that stuff. I found that, like, if you stay in the moment, though, and you really understand your world building, you really understand the motivations of all your NPCs and how they would react and who's behind them, like, what are their motive? Are they poor? Are they scratching their money together, or do they have money? If they have money, they're not worried about losing money. But if you fuck with someone's money when they're scratching together every bit of their existence, that's when they're going to pull a pistol on you and they're going to do awful things. But also, like, if you threaten someone's power in their empire, then they're going to bring the full brunt of their empire down upon you. And if you understand all of those things, like, your NPCs are going to play themselves. You're just going to sit there and, like, yeah, you got to remember, I write down, like, what voice they have. Like, I got a guy that never opens his mouth, like, that's about it. I know what they're going to do because I understand how they fit into the world, and they are going to react. You just react. Because otherwise they're just going about their business. There's no reason for them to interact with your players. That's actually the trick, though, right? Is tying enough threads to your players so you can pull them into the story. Otherwise, they're just going to drive around and drink and do whatever, or anything other than that. Everything other than that will feel unrealistic for a rocker boy. Anything other than playing shows at the bar and getting drunk and using. By the way, I think the next episode we use that really fun the dating sim that I saw you and James talking about. I saw you guys roll on that chart, and I was like, that's going into every game I ever play because it's so funny and so good. It makes for a really fun break from so things get a little intense, and then the rocker boy, I just said, like, he's not on the dating sim exactly, but his drummer is constantly hooking him up with other girls. So the dating sim is just his drummer. Like, who does Bradley show up with for Ricky to date? And he's like, I got this girl that Brad hooked me up with. I guess I gotta go see what that's about. So you have this amazing table to, like, roll on.
But anyway,
I got super sidetracked. No, everything you said was great. It's exactly what game masters need to hear, because I've come to the same kind of conclusions over time. Do all your preparation before the game ever begins, and then when you're at the game, be in the moment, be there, be present, and just put yourself in the shoes of the world around your players. What I usually like to do to simplify things is I break up things into scenes. The players are in one place, they're going to go to another place. They always go to a different place all the time, and something happens there. Usually, if they're not going to kill or kidnap or, do those kinds of action movie things, they're looking for information. So try to figure out ways where you can give your players information if they work for it, if they're smart about it, use their contacts, And then when they're comfortable, throw obstacles at them. Information and obstacles are like two of the most important things you can do when there's complacency and they're like, all drinking and making jokes. It's great when the jokes are cut off by some guy saying like, "Hey, give me all your money."
Yeah.
And it's like, "Oh man, like who is this guy?" And then they look at him and it's like, "Wait, he's wearing a suit. Is he a corporate? This guy's a corporate? What's going on?" And then now there's like an intriguing story going on with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always, just like your encounters when the people are just shooting each other and it's boring, you can blow up a propane tank. You could just do that when they're talking too. It's also fun to explode the room in the middle of a conversation. Yeah, information gathering is great. The trick there is just like, lots of people can all have the same information. The fun part is misinformation. I love telling my party that, oh yes, the plans for, or whatever, the just thinking about the anime, like yes, the experimental exoskeleton is going to be in this location, and then you show up and it's not there, and instead it's a high value spy for a rival corporation who's tied up on the floor, and it's like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for. It's not what I'm being paid for. But on the other hand, now we've got this asset. Like, what do we do now? Yeah, that's always a really fun move as well. Yeah,
and that's, I think we had some really good advice for people here, and I really appreciate you coming on. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you in general, in private, if we could even have it, but it's good to have it here to offer insight to the community. Before we end today, let's make sure we let people know exactly where they can go, the channel name and all that.
Sure. Yeah. On YouTube, almost everything is at Infinite Sided Dice. So youtube.com or whatever /Infinite Sided Dice. On Twitter at Infinite Sided. Instagram at Infinite Sided Dice. Twitch at Infinite Sided Dice. All those things. Do follow it out. You can follow me on Twitter as well.
It's every Wednesdays on Twitch.
Tuesdays on Twitch.
Tuesdays on Twitch.
Yeah, good call. We're doing it live for right now. It's going up live on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on Twitch, and then the VODs are coming out 2 hours ago while we're recording this. 5 o'clock on Fridays. I don't know if that's all going to change. We're so fresh and so clean. We've tried to think about everything that we could in terms of making it easy for people to consume, and then also making it easy enough for us to edit and produce and release in a way that makes some kind of sense. I hope the 2-hour format is what we ended up with. I hope you guys are enjoying that. I'm a big fan of the 4-hour slog, like through an actual play where I just like absorb for, but I think the 2 hours is probably a little more of a manageable bite for most people. And there'll be lots of episodes up.
Yeah, that's it. So if you're listening to this, episode 2 has already come out, possibly episode 3. Hopefully I get this out before then. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, leave comments. That helps with the algorithm. And stay tuned for more Edge of Extinction, right?
Lots more.
That's it. So, Dustin, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate what you're doing for the community. I'm grateful that I've met you. And I'll see you tomorrow because we're going to be doing some fun stuff for Cyberpunk at the shop for a spooky event.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, we didn't.
Yeah.
Well, let's let the event happen, and we'll come back on and talk about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're running games for strangers.
Not necessarily.
We're both running one shots. Your table filled up really quickly, so I got the word from the bird. Hey, you want to open another table? And I said, yeah, of course. So I'm there.
Yeah.
How many people are sitting at home going right now, where in the heck do I get to play at John's table by just signing up?
Green Tower Games, Santa Clarita. Put it on your maps. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Guys.
Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. We'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.